Our next speaker is Elaine, CSP, who's one of the most effective and dynamic speakers addressing topics like high-risk drinking, sexual health, sexual assault, and bystander intervention. For the past 20 years, she has transformed the lives of over 500,000 students at more than 600 universities nationwide. She also presents at high schools, to parent groups, countless professional organizations, and the military. Elaine has worked with athletes from 30 professional sports teams from the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball, as well as the most notable Division I collegiate football programs. At 5 feet 3 inches tall, she loves standing among these gentle giants and enjoys enhancing the lives of young adults and athletes. She motivates her audiences to make positive choices to achieve outstanding performance, and she is ready to share her proven strategies. Elaine is the author of, quote, #Mom, I Got This, Building Your Legacy in College and Beyond. And she's a columnist for Campus Activities. Please welcome Elaine Pasqua.
Good afternoon. The culture of a football team begins at the top with the leadership, and it trickles its way down. You heard through the introduction that I have had a vast array of experience over the years of working with high schools, professional football teams, working with most notable Division I football programs. And I have seen the best of the best and the worst of the worst when it comes to character development. Several months ago, I was with a notable Division I football program. When I'm talking negatively about a team, I don't name names. I walked into the room. The energy that night was electric. They had just won this huge game that they didn't expect to win that weekend. Now, nothing makes me happier to be with an electric group of people because I grew up in Clark, New Jersey, right outside of New York, hyper little Italian. I'm full of energy, so I love my energetic crew right there. So I figured it was going to be a really exciting program. I now live 30 miles north of Philadelphia, so you can imagine the rowdy people I have been surrounded by over the last week. My son called me up the other day. He said, "Mom, the fans were so wild. They literally stole a police horse." They did find it later on. Philly fans have a really bad reputation. But kudos to that team. It's been a remarkable season, and it's been a delight to watch them play. So I was really excited to be working with this young group of men. And literally, 2 minutes before I started, a fight broke out. Literally, tumbling, fist fighting. Somebody broke that up. As the night progressed, I realized that I was with the most disrespectful young group of men that I had ever been with. There were 4 administrators in that room. Not one of them stepped in at one point to try to get them to come back to where they should be in terms of respecting the speaker and appreciating the information that I was bringing to them. Most notably, the head coach was not there because the head coach does not believe that this is important. And to me, that was a reflection on his team. In a week and a half, I will be returning for my 4th time with the University of Alabama football program. The program never begins until Coach Saban walks into the room. He doesn't sit in the front row. He doesn't sit in the back row. He sits in the middle amongst his team. And you can feel the level of respect when he comes into that room. And to me, this is what it's all about. Building that respect, having the ability to be able to make a difference in people's lives. And you can see that certain coaches believe that this is very important. Last year, almost a year ago today, I got a call from the Texas Longhorn football team. They said, "Elaine, we would like you to come out and talk to our young men about sexual assault." I said, "Fantastic. I'm coming out to Austin in April. I'm going to be speaking at Lake Travis High School, and I will also be in the town for the week, staying with a friend of mine." He said, "No, we want you now. Coach thinks that this is important, and we want to address this right away." To me, those little things speak about character. Several days after I got home, I'm in my office, and I hear my husband coming up the stairs, and he's chuckling. In he comes with 15 of these envelopes from the Texas Longhorn football program. And in them were these beautiful envelopes, or beautiful note cards, 15 handwritten thank you notes from these young men at this football program. In my 20 years of speaking, I have never experienced that before. And to me, that spoke volumes about Coach Herman and the level of integrity that he wanted to attain for his team. Little things matter, little things develop character. But what we don't realize is when we walk off stage, or when I walk off stage, I never know what people in the audience are thinking. I always hope that one person pulls one life lesson away from them. And when you get these notes, you realize how much of an influence we can have on people. I was hearing terms, life-changing. I'm going to share this with my little sister because I think this is important for her. It can make a difference in her life and her safety. And the one line that I really liked is, I will take this with me for the rest of my life, and I plan on sharing this information with my friends. They say that for every person you talk to, they will talk to 4 people. So to me, we're passing this forward. So what will you be saying to your players? How can you pass this forward? As coaches, you come into this profession for the love of the game. And then gradually we learn that we really do become intertwined in those players' lives. And we hear the stories. And it's the kids that are coming from the big, expensive homes are struggling as much as the kids who are coming from the hood. And we can make a difference in their lives. And so today I'm going to give you a lot of strategies for talking to these young men and how to set them up to be upstanding citizens, and so we can keep passing this on. Today's landscape is very challenging. My 20 years, I have to keep re-educating myself. Technology has changed things dramatically. Now we've got students that are addicted to their cell phones. They're looking at their smart devices all the time. And because of that, we've got a few things that are going on. First of all, athletes are high profile, especially football. It's the highest profile sport that you will see in a high school or a college campus today. And the media loves to pay attention to these athletes who are falling, who are making bad choices. Texas Christian University had that drug bust several years ago, 19 students who were selling marijuana. Wall Street Journal reports about it. They named the 4 students who were football players. They didn't mention any of the other students by name. I look at this and I go, what about the computer geeks? What about the other, people that are maybe science majors? Why aren't they talking about them? So we want these students to understand they are ambassadors of their school. It is a privilege, and we should dispel any sense of entitlement. Because sometimes we do see that in football. I see that sometimes with certain rookie classes that I've worked with, and we have to always remind them that football is not forever. We never know when you're going to be playing your last down or your last play because of injuries. The average career span now in the NFL is about 3 to 3.5 years. So we have to warn them about the social media and the effects that social media can have on their life, because anybody can take a cell phone out of their pocket, take a picture, send it viral, and forever change their reputation. The communication is breaking down. Students don't know how to talk to one another because they're texting, and they can't face each other. And this is one of the reasons that I'm hearing from college students why they're drinking so much more alcohol than they have in the past. I'm recently, in the last few years, I'm hearing the term, I'm going to get blacked out. And I'm like, really? They're drinking with the goal of passing out, and not just doing it one time, but they're doing it over and over and over again. So we've got to learn to raise their self-confidence, let them be comfortable in their own skin so they can push back against all of these high-risk temptations that are coming at them. The alcohol, the sexual assault, sexual health, irresponsible social media, all of these things that we need to continually talk to these students about and talk to your players about to keep them on track, keep them healthy. I want them to be remembered for their stellar performance on the field and not their indiscretions off, because too many lives are changed with one night, one inconsequential decision. The other thing we're dealing with is a population whose brain has not fully matured. The brain does not fully mature until we're 25 years old, and the last area of the brain that kicks in is the prefrontal cortex, right up here at your forehead. It's in charge of impulse control, higher rational thinking, long-term planning, emotions, executive functioning. And so what we see is that these people take higher risk. And I'm sure most of you here will say that you remember the time when you're sitting there when you're about 26, 27 years old, and you're with your friends reminiscing about some of the things that you did years prior to that, and we all look at each other and we go, boy, we're really lucky we're alive right now. So a lot of us have been there. I've done some pretty crazy stuff. I was lucky. I knew when to walk away. And I think this is one of the things that we need to talk to young people about, is learning to be in the moment and learning to continually reevaluate and reassess what's happening in the situation, and knowing when to step out, knowing when to walk away. If I make this choice, is it going to take me in a direction that I don't want to go in? Or is it going to take me in a direction that I've been working so hard to get towards? So I'm always talking to them about setting goals and always understanding that every step you take affects what happens tomorrow. Now let's talk about sexual violence. What we're seeing right now is there's so much national attention on this. We had the It's On Us campaign that was adopted by the Obama administration. The NFL adopted it. And we are seeing now the hashtag #MeToo movement. There's so much talk and so much conversation about this. And I can honestly tell you, I am often the only female in the room. And these guys are totally confused. Because studies are showing that young women are becoming more aggressive, especially when they're going on to college, because women are outnumbering the men on college campuses. Average campus is about 60% female, 40% male. So gone are the traditional dating norms where we went to the movies, we went out to dinner. And now that the women are outnumbering the men, the studies are actually showing that they're becoming more sexually aggressive and trying to get the men through more sexual means. So sometimes when I'm talking to a group of young men about a number of different topics, because I do include them all in one program, it'll come to a complete halt when I talk about sexual assault. And they're going, but wait a minute, she started it. Why are we getting in trouble? Why do they protect the name of the victim who's speaking out, and why don't they protect the name of the person who's been accused until we know whether that person is guilty or not? Our reputation could get changed forever because somebody might be filing a false accusation. And we do hear this, and I've heard this from a lot of young men. So what we want to do is to talk to these guys about respectful relationships and the effects of hookups, random hookups especially. Now, sexual violence can be perpetrated from male to female, female to male, and female to female. And I have talked to so many survivors, young men and so many young women who are victims of sexual violence. And I hear the stories. I can no longer relax in a social setting because I don't know who I can trust. I don't trust my friends because they left me in a vulnerable situation when I was drunk that night and I was raped. 90% of all sexual assaults in the United States are occurring under the influence of alcohol, and 80% are acquaintance scenarios. We often think of sexual violence as like the boogeyman jumping out of the bushes that somebody doesn't know and attacking them, but it's not. They know the individual. So what we want to do is raise sensitivity as to what this is, how this is affecting survivors. We see eating disorders, sleeping disorders, lower grade point averages, people leaving campuses that they've called their home because they no longer feel safe there. They can no longer call it home. And so what I think is when you're talking to your team about sexual violence, get them to understand the effects that it can have on the survivor. That one night can forever change things for people. And the most important thing that we need to do when we talk to young men about sexual violence is to not attack the men. Because too often, a speaker comes on stage and they immediately start attacking the integrity of young men. And you know what's going to happen? They're going to cross their arms, they're going to shut you out, and you're done. There's a study by Dr. David Lissack from UMass Boston, and he actually interviewed 1,800 college men, and he talked to them about their sexual past. And he concluded, after all these interviews, that it's 6% of the men who are sexual offenders, and 2/3 of them are serial offenders. So like I like to do what we call social norming. Let's take those negatives and flip it to the positive. That means that 94% of the men are upstanding, and they have the integrity to do the right thing. And that's who we want to get to become part of this movement to prevent the sexual violence from occurring. We want these men to be able to stand up. The power of peer mediation is so effective. You talking to the guys is going to be extremely effective, but having them call each other out on their behavior is even more so. So what you want them to do is to get them to look for the personality types that could be more inclined to be somebody who might be a sexual offender. Hey, baby, looking good today. You've got that person who is objectifying individuals, treating them like objects instead of treating them like a person, that there's a soul, that there's a human in there with emotions and feelings. Do you have people that are bragging about how many people they've slept with? Do you have somebody who's immediately invading somebody's personal body space and they're all over an individual? That's another sign. Do you have somebody that's immediately acting possessive, jealous? That's another one. Or they're accusing them of being uptight. So you want these guys to be able to look for this, and you want them to be able to look out for one another at parties, especially when the alcohol is flowing. And so what they do is they've got to be able to read people's body language. Nothing makes me happier than when somebody comes up to me after a program and says, you helped me think differently, and I'm now going to keep my radar up at parties. And so what I want them to do you know what the #1 weapon of a sexual offender is? Anybody? It's alcohol. They're feeding the person drinks. They're trying to get them wasted. They're trying to break them down. So I want them to look for that scenario of the person who has become wasted because somebody's feeding them drinks. And then eventually you have this individual that's preying on them. Sometimes they may go over, they grab them by the hand, and they start leading them out of the room. Now, what are most of the people thinking as that person's being let out of there? They're getting lucky, right? But how many people are thinking, that person's so wasted, they can't give consent? And that's when we want people to have the integrity to step in. And what they do is you can divide and conquer. A few people will go over to the potential perpetrator, and you don't want it to get violent, because when we get over 0.05 blood alcohol level, that's when the personality changes come into place, and that's where the violence can occur. So what you do is those few people will go over and talk to the potential perpetrator, and they will just have a casual conversation with them just to merely distract them. And while that's happening, the other people will go over to the potential victim and get them out of there and get them to a safe place. The mere act of stepping in could have a long-term positive impact on somebody's emotional well-being. And this is what we want these guys to do. Now, I want to backtrack to technology. When you talk to your young men about relationships, if they have any text messages that have gone between them and a girl, they should save every single text message that they have, because we have seen cases where a young woman has accused somebody falsely of sexually assaulting them. And then they go back and they look through the text message threads and they see, oh no, she is the one that started it. So sometimes people have gotten off because of the text messages. So encourage them to save that, okay? Now, what I want to do is talk to you quickly about consent, coercion, and incapacitation. Talk to them about consent. So, consent, verbal willing agreement between two people to engage in intimate relations. A person has every legal right to withdraw it, and at any time they could be kissing somebody and say, don't want to go any further, and they have to honor that, and they have to respect that. And just because somebody doesn't say no doesn't mean yes, because it's a natural human response to freeze. So we need to understand that people, we need to read body language. The alcohol is muddying our decision-making process. When we consume more than 1 drink an hour, we're shutting down that prefrontal cortex. So we're shutting down our ability to read the social cues, to be able to communicate. And so it's so important that we get these students to learn that alcohol and intimate relationships should not be working. Now we have also coercion. This is when somebody is trying to verbally intimidate somebody into engaging into a certain type of sexual act. and they're forcing them. And that, too, can leave long-term psychological scars. And then we have incapacitation. If the victim is drunk, even if they consented, the law will basically say that they did not have the clarity, nor did they have the wherewithal to be able to give what we call affirmative consent. And so what we're telling students now, if people are drinking, it's a good time not to be hooking up with somebody else, because you just don't know. And even if they've only had one drink, I was at Baylor the other night, and they were talking about, I was talking to the Title IX officer. She said, even somebody under the influence of 2 drinks, a lot of it changes because due to hormonal changes or occurrences throughout the month, what they've eaten, what they've drank. So we never know how people are going to handle alcohol on a day-to-day basis. And that's why we were just saying to these kids, just stay away from somebody when they've been drinking, because it's just not worth it. When Jameis Winston entered his senior year at Florida State, I was in the room doing a program for them. On my way down, flying down from Philadelphia, I did my homework. I was reading about all the sexual assault accusations against him. And I had my preconceived notions what Jameis was going to look like in that room. I figured he'd be wearing a hoodie. I figured he'd be sitting in the back row. He'd be slumped down, head back on the chair, you know, just looking pretty apathetic and not wanting to engage in this. Jameis threw me off. He sat in the front row, slightly off to the side. He was wearing glasses, and that's why I didn't recognize him. When I got to the part of the program where I was talking about sexual assault, Jameis started firing one really intelligent question after another at me. And by question number 4, I said to myself, wow, this is a remarkably intelligent young man. And the senior women's administrator realized I didn't know it was him, and she goes, oh, Jameis, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's him. And so he continued to fire one question after another. And in fact, at one point, the guys laughed at him. And whenever that happens, I turn to the rest of the team and I say to them, I bet you all were thinking the same thing, but you didn't have the courage to ask, and he does. Jameis walked me through the night. I heard he asked about protocol for taking young women home. He asked me questions about sex. He asked me all sorts of questions. And finally, he leans in and he says with passion, how do you truly know you don't have consent? And I looked at him, and my whole mindset did a 180. And I said to myself, whoa, this was just a bad hookup. And I heard the details, some of the details that you don't hear from the media. And sometimes these nights, when people are drinking and they're hooking up, we don't realize what can happen. This is going to be a cloud that will still hang over Jameis. There will always be that cloud of doubt that will hang over him because of one night, because of one hookup. Alcohol was involved. What we often see with these young men is race is involved too. You will see a white girl hooking up with a black guy, and then daddy finds out about it. My daughter wouldn't do that. You were raped. You need to press charges. I hear that a lot. It's not worth it for the one night of pleasure. And that's what we need to tell these young men, that we need to keep thinking. We need to be respectful, and we need to be thinking about our legacy and our own reputation and the reputation of our team that we are representing and playing for, okay? So what we also see is dating violence. Now, football is a very aggressive sport. A lot of these guys have been playing this game since they were really little, and they're used to being aggressive. And we've got to teach them to leave that aggression on the field, and when they walk off, that's behind them. And a lot of times we see the pushing, the shoving, and the dating violence. And dating violence can consist of the physical abuse, pushing, slapping, hitting, pulling hair. It can be emotional, being possessive of them, bribing them, blaming them for things. And it can be verbal. And what we want to do is to get these guys to know what are their triggers for their anger, and learn to replace that anger with disappointment. Learn how to have a constructive conversation. Instead of name calling, oh, you're a bitch, or whatever, you've got to get them to sit down and say, I'm really upset because what you did, this is how it affected me. And so getting them to be able to do that, and more importantly, get them to sit down when they talk to somebody. When I'm with these NFL players and I do interactive exercises, which I'm going to do in a minute, I feel like I'm in a canyon with these guys. I'm like little, I'm spinning around looking at these guys. It can be really intimidating for someone who's my size. So you want to teach them to talk and be eye level and be able to verbally communicate what's going on so we can avoid this violence as well, okay? The other trend that we are now seeing in the United States is that sexually transmitted infections have reached an all-time high. According to the Centers for Disease Control, in the last reporting year, chlamydia went up 6%, gonorrhea went up 13%, and syphilis just reached a 20-year high, and it went up 19%. And now we've got hookup apps. So, you know, back in the day, people had to go to bars, they had to talk to one another. And now they're just pulling out their cell phones and there's nope, 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 yeah, okay, I'll meet you in an hour. And they believe that this is one of the reasons that sexually transmitted infections have reached an all-time high. And in fact, 50% of all people under the age of 25 are infected with a sexually transmitted infection. 25% under the age of 21 are infected. So what I want you to do is to talk to these young men about being safe. Abstinence is the safest thing, being respectful of one another. And what I want to do now is I'm going to call about 15 volunteers up to do an exercise. Because this exercise, I'm known for my interactive learning style, and it's something that people remember. But the reason I want to demonstrate this with you today, because it will give you some talking points as you are working with your team. Now, we have 15 medicine cups here. They represent your bodily fluids. Most of the cups are filled with water, and 3 of them are filled with sodium hydroxide. The 3 that are filled with sodium hydroxide represent a sexually transmitted infection. What do you want today? Chlamydia, herpes, gonorrhea? Usually, pick your STI. We can combine them and call it herpes, gonorrhea, syphilis, AIDS if you would like. But anyway, I usually say that it's either HIV or herpes because they both live in the body for the rest of your life. Now, when you come up on stage, we do not know what 3 of you will be our symbolically infected individuals. What we want to do is simulate that you are having unprotected relations with 3 different individuals. So here's how you will have your relations. You will take the contents from your cup and pour it completely into your partner's cup. So that's empty. Take the second cup, pour that in, now that's empty, and then pour back again so you have equal amounts. Again, 1, 2, 3 exchanges. When you're done, you can look your partner in the eye and you can say to them, was that as good for you as it was for me? Now, when you are done with that, I am going to put a solution in your cup called phenolphthalein. It's a chemistry-based exercise. If your solution turns a bright pink color, it means that you're symbolically testing positive. So what I want for you to do is to go into a more thoughtful process, because usually with college students, we hear 4-letter words. And I'm going to be clean today. And so if somebody was saying to you, I'm sorry, you have herpes for the rest of your life, or you're HIV positive, what would be the first thing that would go through your mind? If your cup is clear, you're negative, how do you feel? 2 housekeeping things. Don't drink the solution in the cup, because if you get the sodium hydroxide, you will not feel well. Secondly, don't stand there and exchange with 3 people amongst yourselves, because we want to shake up the population. So the group will be somewhat fluid. Do it over there, come back here, come back to the middle, but we want to sort of shake it up. More of what we see in the real population. So I would love 15 people to come up. I'd love to see both men and women, nice, good group. And don't start exchanging. I'll stand here first before you come up. Come on up, let's go. Wake up, it's good time after lunch. Keep coming, keep coming. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Where are my ladies? Real good, we got some women coming down too. Grab a cup. Grab a cup. There's your bodily fluids. Okay.
I'm by myself so far? Thank you.
We got some women. Okay, keep coming. Keep coming. How many do we have? Thank you for coming down and joining me. Thank you. We're getting some good remarks up here already. Okay, it's kind of awkward. We need 1, 2, 3, 4. I need 4 more. Oh, what? I need, oh, sorry. Did you want to choose your own? 2.
Thanks.
I need 2 more, please, very quickly, so we can stay on time. Come on, 2 more. Don't be shy. You're coaches, you're leaders. Let's go.
2's coming.
2's coming. We got him. We got him. Okay, now, one last trick that I'm pulling on you guys. Sometimes I just talk about sexual violence and sexual assault. We oftentimes will assume that somebody wants to have sex because you drank with them, they kissed you, they were dancing in a very provocative way. Maybe they were dressed in a very sexy way and revealing way. And we shouldn't assume that somebody wants to have sex just because of those behaviors. So, while you're here amongst your group, don't assume that the person wants to exchange with you. I want you to come up with a creative way of asking for consent. I've waited till they get on stage because if I do that ahead of time, they don't want to do it. All right, ready? So 1, 2, 3, go. Do your 3 people and then come to me and get exchanged. I always sneak that on them. I'm learning over the years that you just don't do this. So, all right. How many do you think we're going to get? You don't know. All right, now mix the group up. Keep mixing up. Now you go over to that side, and you come over here. I got to keep them moving around, so. All right. Come to me when you're done.
So we do it with 3 different people.
3 different people. 3 people, and then come to me when you're done, please. All right? Anybody ready to get tested? She's quick. All right, we got it now. I'm waking you all up. And she's positive, too. All right, we got one. Line up behind me, please. Just kind of line up here. Yeah. All right, positive. Yeah. Oh, we got a negative. Good job. All right. Keep coming. She's like, no. Positive. Keep coming. No. Positive. All right. Positive.
Oh, man. I remember who she was.
Here he goes. All right, we got another negative. All right, good job. He's hiding his status. When this happens too, positive, positive, keep coming, and positive.
I'm definitely positive then.
He knows it, he
Yeah,
knows
same.
it. Positive, all right, positive, keep
I
coming.
trusted y'all, man.
He trusted him, see? Dude, I love the remarks I get. Positive, positive. All right, we'll turn this on in a minute too. All right, so how many negatives did we have? 2? 1 too many. No, not enough. 2, so we only had 2 negative people. Okay, so the numbers speak for themselves. So we started off with 3, and 13 ended up getting it. Now, the 3 is not even 25% of the group, so you have to consider that. In the real population, it's 25%. But you see how many people got infected. So what were the first things that went through your mind when you saw your cup turn pink? What do you think? You said 4-letter word. Yes, we do that a lot. What do you think?
I was devastated.
Devastated.
That's negative, so I'm good.
You're negative. She's my negative one. How are my negative people feeling? Relieved? Lucky? Let's go back to negative people. They ended up sharing with people who tested positive. And a lot of people are confused by that. But what it shows is that basically those people that you shared with, they started off negative as well. And they went and got infected by their 2nd or their 3rd exchange, showing you that the more people you sleep with, the wider the infectious pool you open yourself up to. What else did you think? What do you think?
I was just devastated.
Devastated.
I thought, darn.
Darn.
I saw her, I wasn't shocked.
You saw her, you were shocked.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Oh, there's my negative. All right.
Who was it?
Who was it? Very good. That's what I hear. So let me ask you a question. Do you remember who you had sex with?
Yes.
You did remember. Good job. But that doesn't always happen when the alcohol is involved. Okay. And that's the question that I hear more than anything. Who gave it to me? And we may not find out. What else?
No bueno.
No bueno.
Devastated.
Devastated?
My life is over.
My life is over.
How can this happen?
Yep.
Was it him?
It wasn't him? No?
Let's just say this is not a real life representation.
Okay. Thank God.
Shocked.
Shocked.
Was it worth it?
Was it very good? And that's a lot of times I'll say to the students, how many of you had regrets and said, why did I drink that night and hook up with that person? Was it worth it? How did my life change? How does it change your future relationships? And that's what I want them to look for. How do you tell somebody that you have this? You have the responsibility to do this, and it forever changes future relationships. Shocked. How many of you were surprised that you got it? This is a good time to talk to young people about invincibility. We think that we can do anything that we want. And we've got to let them understand, because as all of us have gotten older, we share the stories, we know the stories, and we have to continue to share those stories with them, showing them that we're vulnerable. As humans, we're not invincible. How many of you watched the person who you exchanged with get their cup tested first, and you saw their cup turn pink, and you're like, oh man, I got it? How many of you did that? All right, how'd that feel? And I tell the students, that's like getting a phone call after you've been with somebody. Hey, I got chlamydia, you gotta go to the clinic. That ruins your Friday night. So, you know, it's like, darn, that's not the news I wanted to hear today. So again, so these are a lot of the different talking points that we have, but it's just a life-changing event, how easy it is to travel through the population. And you know, I think whenever you can bring interaction into any type of learning, that visual, those pink cups. A dean of students who I worked with at a college in New Jersey, he moved back home into Canada, and he told me, we talked a few months ago, it was the first time we talked in about 6 years. He said, Elaine, my wife cheated on me. We broke up. He said, you know what the first thing I thought of when I found out that she was cheating on me? Pink cups. So those visuals stick with people. So, but again, you see some of the talking points. So as you talk to your teams about responsible relationships and about the effects of not being responsible, a lot of these talking points come through, okay? Give these people a round of applause. Thank you so much. You can put the cups back over there. Appreciate it. All right, thank you. Good job. He said, nobody wants to touch me anymore, right? I always hear the greatest remarks. Okay, now, as coaches, you have the ability to change lives forever. You have the ability to mentor. And one thing I want you to think about, how many times do we tell our kids to look both ways when they cross the road? Over and over again. But how many times do we talk to them about these critical topics? Alcohol, drugs, sex, sexual assault. We should be talking to them about these over and over again. Use the teachable moments. We're hearing in the media. Take those moments and talk to them in the locker room about these stories that you've heard. It should be continual. And watch for certain symptoms, red flags. If you think a student might or a player might have problems, are they coming late to practice? Is their appearance starting to change? Are their grades starting to fail? Are they withdrawing? You've got to get to know their stories. It's important to know these people, and when you know them, you might be able to see the changes, and you want to act on the changes. And those critical conversations are so important. And the best way to have these conversations is not to sit them at the table and say, okay, we need to talk about this, because it's really intimidating for them. So when I talk to parents about how to talk to your kids about sex, we say the best time to do it is when they're in the car and they're in the back seat. First of all, they can't drop and roll at 60 miles an hour and escape it, but it's less intimidating than when you're face to face. So, not that you're gonna have a player in a car, but maybe if you're on a bus and it seems like it's an appropriate time, when you're shoulder to shoulder, you will have a more meaningful conversation with them. Maybe you can get them to help bring equipment back from the field, have a little quiet time so you can talk to them, and focus on some of the behaviors that you're seeing and the concerns that you're seeing, and then do your mentoring. You never know what they're going to come away with. I want to share a story about Jake Moussa. Jake Moussa, I met years ago at Georgia State, and then we were reunited again when I've been doing training for the New York Giants now for the last 8 years, and Jake was in the 3rd rookie class that I had worked with. And Jake, out of that was probably the most entitled group of young men that I had worked with in the NFL. But Jake was the most respectful one in that group. He always called me Miss Elaine. And we became good friends. And it wasn't until I saw him that second time that I learned his remarkable story. Jake's father was a minister, and he moved the family from Tacoma, Washington to California to start a church with his brother. So Jake and his family, there were 3 siblings, 3 boys. Mother had it's a schizoid disorder, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but a schizoid affective disorder. So what happened was they moved there, they're living in the garage, things are starting to fail, they're running out of money, and Jake's father was incarcerated twice for beating his mother. Now they've got no money, the father's in jail. So Jake and his brothers lived in an Aerostar van in Parks. Their clothes were in cardboard boxes. They washed up at fountains every morning to go to school. They slept on park benches. Jake was embarrassed every time his mother would try to befriend somebody so that they could take them home. He felt shame. His best meal of the day was a government-assisted program from WIC that he got at breakfast in the morning. And sometimes he would try to bring some food home for his mother. Eventually, they moved to Phoenix. And when they were in Phoenix, his father was diagnosed with throat cancer. His mother's mental illness worsened. And it got to the point where they were in a park one night, father's in the hospital. 2 nights in a row, the police threw him out one night of sleeping in a park. And then he saw him again a few days later in the park, and that's when he knew that something was wrong. And that policeman brought the mother into a home for battered women, and Jake and his brothers were put into a group home. And his father died right at that period of time. And Jake said, my life can't get any worse at this point in time, but I'm going to do whatever I can. The one brother was now in jail for dealing drugs because they had lived in a really bad neighborhood in Phoenix, and they made a lot of bad choices. But Jake and his brother Louis said, we're going to do what we can to rise above this, to get out of this. He started playing football in his freshman year. And it was football that saved his life. And it was the mentoring of the coaches. One of his teammates took him and his brother Louis in, and they lived with him. And he said, this was the first time that I ever felt family. This was the first time that I felt what family should feel like. And he accelerated as a defensive linebacker for Georgia State. And he was drafted by the New York Giants. I think he was a free agent. He gets to the Giants, and within the middle of the summer camp, he had a hamstring injury, and he was let go. And then he worked hard, and he did what he could do to rehabilitate that injury, and the Giants picked him up again the next year. And he made it through the summer camp, and right before the first game, he was called upstairs. And the mantra at the New York Giants is, you don't want to be called upstairs because you know what's happening when you are called upstairs. They're giving you the news that they're letting you go. Jake was let go. And as he said to me, you never know when your last play and when your last down is going to be. But he did go to the Canadian Football League, and he played there for a while, and it didn't work out. So he went back to school. He finished his degree at Georgia State. And then he's now up in the Bay Area. I talked to Jake last week. He is now working on a dual degree, a degree in sports psychology, a master's in sports psychology, and he's getting his doctorate in developmental psychology. And he said, I'm doing this because I want to give back to all those people that gave to me, that got me to where I am today. And so he wants to give back to those high school coaches. He wants to give back to Charles Way, who was with the New York Giants, Denise Johnson, who is the team psychologist at the New York Giants. And he said, and even you, Miss Elaine, I want to give back for what you did to me. And so this is what we call paying forward. This is what all of you have the ability to do, to be able to mentor these young people. And you may not know how you're going to affect them while they're in your high school. It might be another 20 years where they're going to do whatever they can to find you, to seek you out, and to say, thank you. You made an incredible difference in my life. So for all of you, keep talking to them. Keep using those teachable moments. And remember, you have the ability to change so many lives forever and for the better. I applaud you for the work that you do, and I'm honored to be here with you today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, before I go, I wanted to also, I had turned the association on to this video called the Consent is as Simple as a Cup of Tea, right? Now, before I talk about that, I just also want to promote, within the Texas High School Coaches Association, we also have a sexual assault training program for you and also dating violence program, and it is called, again, Becky? Start the Conversation. I knew I was going to forget this again. So again, use those resources. It is on the website, so you can check that out. Now, this video is probably the clearest, simplest video that it just puts this whole issue of sexual violence and consent into perspective. And you will absolutely love it. You can find it online, and when you look for it, make sure you look for the one that says clean, because there's another one that's not quite so clean. So enjoy this, and again, share this with your teammates. Thank you again. Appreciate it.